To build a mind that terrifies people, Nietzsche demands that you begin with betrayal, not of others, but of the parts of yourself that still seek comfort in the crowd. The herd, as Nietzsche saw it, is not just a mass of people. It is a psychological condition. It is the internalized voice of conformity, morality, tradition, and fear. It is the need to be accepted, to be agreeable, to be good by someone else's definition. And as long as you serve this inner herd, you will never be free, let alone powerful. The first act of mental sovereignty is the murder of that voice, not a symbolic silencing, but a true severance. Nietzsche's entire philosophy is a war against the mediocrity that the herd installs in the soul. From the moment you are born, the world begins shaping you to fit it. It teaches you to obey, to please, to avoid conflict, to suppress instinct, and to apologize for your strength. But to Nietzsche, this is not education, it is domestication. The herd is terrified of anyone who thinks for themselves, speaks with clarity, or dares to stand alone. And so they punish it with guilt, with exile, with shame. The terrifying mind, then, is not one born different. It is one who dares to become different despite the cost. This act of separation is painful. It must be, because the herd lives inside your identity. It is in your desire to be liked, in your fear of criticism, in your impulse to apologize for thinking differently. To kill the inner herd is to kill the part of yourself that has been trained to submit. Nietzsche's true strength begins when you no longer crave to belong, when you no longer flinch at being misunderstood, when solitude becomes not a curse but a sanctuary. Because it is in solitude that you begin to hear your own voice, uncorrupted by approval, unfiltered by fear. The mind begins to harden, not through aggression, but through clarity. You begin to see how many of your thoughts were never really yours. How much of your morality was inherited, not chosen. How your ambitions were scripted by society, not forged in fire. And in this awakening, the herd dies, slowly, violently, beautifully. What remains is a kind of silence, a terrifying stillness, not empty, but clean. From this space, a new mind is born, not one that repeats, but one that creates. Not one that adapts, but one that defines. Nietzsche's Übermensch is not a superhero. He is not better than others in some superficial way. He is terrifying because he no longer plays the game. He has stepped outside the social matrix and declared himself his own master. He doesn't rebel like a child. He transcends like a god, and because of this, the herd hates him. Not because he harms them, but because his existence exposes their fear. His independence highlights their dependence. His courage humiliates their comfort. You can recognize someone who has killed the inner herd by how they carry themselves. They speak less, but when they do, it is with precision. They don't argue, because they no longer need validation. They don't flinch in silence. They don't rush to prove their worth. Their energy is unsettling, not because it is aggressive, but because it is self-contained. They are a closed circuit. Their mind has become a fortress, and their thoughts are sovereign territory. Nietzsche's greatest enemy was not stupidity. It was obedience. Blind obedience to unexamined norms, unquestioned belief, automatic guilt. These are the shackles of the herd. And so the first task in building a mind so strong it terrifies people is not to read more books, not to debate harder, but to begin this act of inner deconstruction. To look into the mirror and see which parts of you are borrowed, which are installed, and which must be burned. Not out of hatred, but out of hunger. The hunger to become something the world cannot domesticate. The hunger to exist beyond imitation. The hunger to be free, even if that freedom comes at the cost of everything you once thought you were. To Nietzsche, the will is not a metaphor. It is the engine of your becoming, the raw force that either shapes your life or leaves it to be shaped by others. Most people mistake their will for fleeting desires, bursts of motivation, or emotional whims. But Nietzsche understood the will as something far more ancient, primal, and sacred. It is the invisible muscle that determines whether you ascend or decay, whether you remain in chains or learn to forge your own. If the herd mind is your prison, then the will to power is the hammer that shatters its walls. The will must be trained. Not pampered, not praised, but honed in resistance. This is the part most people never confront. They want a strong mind, but they avoid pain. They want clarity, but they fear solitude. They crave strength, but they will not endure discipline. Nietzsche's entire vision of greatness is built on the opposite principle that your soul becomes sharper the more it is tested, the more it is placed under pressure and forced to choose. Because that's what the will does. It chooses. Not what is easy, but what is necessary. Not what feels good, but what is true. You do not build willpower through comfort. You build it by placing your hand in the flame and learning not to scream. You build it by doing the thing you fear, by confronting the void you want to avoid, by staying in the arena longer than your mind thinks it can. Nietzsche saw that most people give up not because of weakness, but because they have never learned to command themselves. They are slaves to moods, to distractions, to external demands. Their minds are fragmented, pulled in 1,000 directions, incapable of holding a single line of fire. A terrifying mind, by contrast, is a will made flesh. It does not beg to be directed, it directs itself. But this training is not glamorous. It is repetition. It is silence. It is choosing discipline when no one is watching. It is pushing beyond fatigue, not because someone is cheering, but because there is something sacred in mastery. Nietzsche called for a revaluation of values. Not only moral values, but the values that govern our inner lives. Comfort, security, pleasure. These are not goals for a strong mind. These are traps. The real value is self-mastery. The ability to say no to yourself, to tame the chaos inside, to hold a vision so tightly that even pain bows before it. This is the will to power. Not the will to dominate others, but the will to shape yourself into something rare. The will to become your own sculptor, your own battlefield, your own god. In every great creator, in every revolutionary thinker, in every terrifying presence, Nietzsche saw this same fire, a will so strong that it refuses to be reduced. A mind so focused that it becomes dangerous to anyone living in denial. These are the people who terrify the world, not because they harm others, but because their clarity makes compromise look like cowardice. Their discipline makes excuses seem pathetic. To train your will is to become unbreakable, not through arrogance, but through alignment. You begin to move through the world with a kind of inner pressure, a quiet force that does not need to announce itself. People feel it when you enter a room. It's in the way you hold your posture, the way your eyes don't dart, the way your words are chosen with precision. You are not rushing to speak, because your silence holds weight. You are not trying to be impressive, because you already know who you are. This stillness, this control, this burning restraint, it unnerves people. It makes them question their own lack of direction. And yet, the terrifying mind does not seek intimidation. It simply refuses to bend. It has trained itself to obey its own law. It is governed by its own hierarchy. At the top sits the will, cold, silent, unyielding. Below it, everything else. This structure does not emerge naturally. It must be built. With time, with solitude, with repetition. Every time you resist impulse, your will grows stronger. Every time you choose the hard thing over the easy lie, your will sharpens. It becomes your sword. Not to hurt, but to cut through illusion. Not to dominate others, but to dominate the only territory that truly matters, yourself. Friedrich Nietzsche did not merely tolerate suffering, he elevated it. He called it sacred, necessary, transformative. To Nietzsche, suffering was not a defect to be cured, but a gateway to becoming. A mind that has not suffered is like unshaped clay, soft, passive, and easily molded by others. But a mind that has passed through the fire of despair, shame, loss, rejection, and existential doubt, that mind is dangerous. That mind has structure. It has seen its own abyss and learned how to walk through it. It cannot be broken because it has already been broken and rebuilt in its own image. Modern thought encourages avoidance of pain. It teaches us to numb it with distractions, sedate it with false positivity, or run from it into the arms of comfort. But Nietzsche offers no such escape. He demands that you feel it, face it, study it, because in suffering, he saw the very conditions that allow the self to be forged. The strength of a mind is measured not by how it avoids pain, but by how deeply it can endure it without losing itself. And not only endure it, but use it, transmute it, turn it into fuel. This is why Nietzsche praised the tragic hero, not the comfortable man. The one who stares directly at the cruelty of existence, who experiences betrayal, isolation, illness, and failure, and yet does not crumble. The terrifying mind is not built in sunlight. It is carved in the shadows. It is shaped by long periods of silence, where the mind spirals inward and finds nothing to hold on to but itself. In that silence, you encounter your fears in their purest form, not just external threats, but internal fractures. The fear of being forgotten, the terror of being meaningless, the loneliness of total autonomy. Nietzsche believed these were not curses, but rites of passage. To walk the Nietzschean path is to become a kind of alchemist, turning suffering into gold. But this is not spiritual fluff. It is brutal inner work. It means looking at your wounds not as something to hide, but as something to mine. What did the pain teach you? What illusions did it burn away? What strength did it uncover that you never would have found in comfort? This is the sacredness Nietzsche pointed to. The idea that suffering is not a detour, but the very path to transformation. Without it, there is no depth, no character, no power. A person who has embraced their suffering carries a weight that others instinctively recognize. It's in their eyes, calm, unflinching, ancient. It's in the way they walk, deliberate, unhurried, sovereign. This is not about stoicism in the shallow sense of hiding emotion. It is about becoming greater than your emotion. Not by suppression, but by integration. You have faced the chaos and come out on the other side, not clean, but real. Not invulnerable, but unafraid. That fearlessness, that rootedness, that deep presence, it terrifies people. Because it shows them what they are still running from. Nietzsche's infamous line, "What does not kill me makes me stronger," is often misunderstood. It does not mean that all suffering is automatically good. It means that suffering only strengthens you when you choose to wrestle with it, when you refuse to let it make you bitter or small. It's not the pain itself, but your relationship with it that determines whether you rise or fall. A terrifying mind is one that has chosen to rise. Not because it had to, but because it decided to extract meaning from agony. To make something sacred from something brutal. To turn scars into symbols. This is why those who have suffered deeply, who have learned to carry it with elegance, without complaint, without theatrics, they possess a gravity. People don't know how to speak to them, don't know how to manipulate them. Their pain has made them fluent in the language of the soul, and when they speak, it is not with noise, it is with weight. They don't need to raise their voice, because they are not trying to prove anything. Their strength is not performative, it is earned, it is felt in the space they occupy. It is terrifying not because it is loud, but because it is true. In Nietzsche's world, to suffer is not to fail, it is to begin. It is the moment when the mask is torn off, when the surface is shattered, and when the foundation of something unshakable can finally be built. The weak flee from this moment. The herd pretends it can be avoided, but the one who seeks to build a terrifying mind walks directly into it. Not with bravado, but with purpose. They do not seek pain for its own sake. They seek the truth that lies on the other side of it, and that truth, the one born from blood and silence and solitude, is the beginning of all real power. To Nietzsche, the mind is not a tool to be filled with facts or fed by fleeting opinions. It is a fortress. It must be built, brick by brick, through solitude, self-inquiry, study, and the discipline of independent thinking. A mind that terrifies people is not aggressive by nature. It is unshakable. It has walls high enough to block out propaganda, gates strong enough to keep manipulation at bay, and towers from which it sees farther than the average eye. It is not reactive, it is strategic. It does not bow to trends or noise. It studies them, understands their roots, and chooses when, if ever, to engage. Nietzsche's ideal thinker does not shout in the public square or beg for attention. He retreats into his own mental citadel and fortifies it. This is not isolation in the emotional sense, it is an intellectual necessity. The world, Nietzsche believed, was full of distractions, lies, and herd-driven ideas that seduce the undisciplined mind. Every doctrine, every virtue, every social narrative comes with invisible chains. To protect yourself from these chains, you must not merely rebel. You must build a structure of thought that can endure in silence, in opposition, and in the face of hostility. The construction of this fortress begins with reading, not for entertainment, not for credentials, but as an act of war against mental laziness. You do not read just to learn. You read to challenge yourself, to sharpen your conceptual weapons, to question even the ground you stand on. Nietzsche read not just to agree, but to test. His mind was not a container for knowledge, it was a forge. Every idea that entered had to earn its place. Every belief had to survive interrogation. In this way, you do not become a follower of Nietzsche, or of any thinker. You become your own architect. And like any fortress, the mind must be structured. It needs foundations, logic, self-awareness, philosophical discipline. It needs inner chambers, quiet places of reflection where emotion is processed, not obeyed. It needs armories, language, rhetoric, metaphor, myth. And above all, it needs a center, a throne room, where the sovereign sits. This sovereign is your will, your command center, the part of you that decides what thoughts live or die, what values rule, what truths you accept, even when they hurt. The terrifying mind doesn't need to raise its voice because its thoughts are so tightly aligned that there is no inner contradiction. This is what most people lack: coherence. They believe one thing emotionally, another socially, and a third intellectually. They are at war with themselves. The strong mind does not suffer from this fragmentation. It has taken the time to break apart its assumptions and rebuild them. It has suffered through the crisis of disillusionment, emerged from the rubble, and made peace with not having easy answers. This makes it immune to most forms of control. You cannot manipulate someone who has already questioned everything. You cannot shame someone who has faced their darkness and accepted it. Nietzsche's contempt for the passive intellect is visible throughout his writings. He despised people who parroted ideas they didn't understand, who moralized without thinking, who treated popular opinion as truth. He wanted thinkers who carved their own inner cathedrals, who lived with philosophical integrity, and who spoke not because they had something to say, but because they had something true to say. Truth in this sense isn't merely factual, it is existential. It is the kind of truth that is earned, lived, suffered through. A fortress built without this truth is decoration. It may impress others, but it cannot protect you. When you build a fortress of thought, you don't just protect yourself from deception. You change the way others experience you. You become unreadable to shallow minds. People are disturbed by your presence not because you are violent, but because they cannot predict you. They don't know how to relate to someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't agree out of politeness, doesn't seek approval. Your presence becomes unsettling because it reflects back their own lack of structure. They feel the weight of your inner discipline even when you say nothing. This is not arrogance, it is power. The quiet, dense, gravitational power of a mind that has done the work. A mind that no longer needs noise to feel real. A mind that holds its ground because it knows the ground it stands on. Nietzsche believed that every great individual must pass through a period of self-exile, a retreat into their own citadel of thought, not to escape the world, but to build the strength to re-enter it with unshakable clarity. This is how the terrifying mind is made, not in crowds, not in applause, but in solitude, brick by brick, question by question, until there is no longer any room for illusion. Only will, only structure, only truth. To build a mind so strong it terrifies people, Nietzsche insists on one final transformation. perhaps the most dangerous and liberating of them all, the transcendence of morality, not the abandonment of ethics or the descent into cruelty, as so many misinterpret, but the shedding of inherited frameworks of good and evil that keep the mind chained to convention, fear, and guilt. Nietzsche's philosophy is a call not to a morality, but to authentic value creation. A terrifying mind is not one that rejects morality out of rebellion. It is one that sees through it and rises above it, forging a new compass that originates from within. Morality, in Nietzsche's critique, is largely the invention of the weak, not weak in a physical sense, but spiritually weak, resentful, conformist, afraid of freedom. Slave morality, as he called it, was built to protect the herd from the strong. It praises humility, obedience, submission, and pity, not because these are divine virtues, but because they neutralize threat. Anything bold, independent, proud, or instinctual is labeled dangerous, selfish, or evil, not because it is wrong, but because it threatens the social order built on sameness and control. For Nietzsche, this is not enlightenment, it is suppression. To step beyond good and evil is not to become reckless or sociopathic. It is to become sovereign. The terrifying mind no longer asks what is permissible. It asks what is true. It no longer acts to be praised. It acts in alignment with a deeper, self-created code. It does not ask, is this good, by someone else's standards. It asks, is this mine? This independence of value is the essence of the Übermensch, the one who lives as a creator, not a follower, the one who does not inherit meaning, but generates it. Living beyond good and evil also means the terrifying mind refuses to be manipulated by moral pressure. Praise no longer intoxicates. Criticism no longer stings. Guilt no longer works as a leash. The world cannot control what it cannot moralize. And so, when someone refuses to bow to collective values, refuses to pretend, refuses to soften their language or water down their will, society calls them dangerous. Not because they are violent, but because they are free. A mind that does not belong to any ideology, party, religion, or popular cause is a threat to every system that depends on obedience. But this transcendence comes at a cost. Nietzsche knew that the moment you leave the world of ready-made morality, you enter a desert. There are no signposts, no guarantees. You must construct your own principles from scratch, and you must live with the weight of that responsibility. Most people cannot bear this kind of freedom. It paralyzes them. They would rather be told what is right and wrong than discover it themselves. But the terrifying mind does not fear this abyss. It welcomes it, because in that space of nothingness, it sees opportunity. It sees the power to define, to affirm, to will into being something that is truly your own. This is why Nietzsche valued affirmation over negation. The strong mind does not live in reaction. It lives in creation. It does not waste its time condemning others or proving itself righteous. It simply becomes something undeniable. Its existence is its argument. Its presence is its proof. It does not preach values. It embodies them. And those values, born from solitude and struggle, are not abstract principles. They are expressions of will. They are sculpted from the very material of lived experience, refined through fire, silence, and disillusionment. To live beyond good and evil is also to be misunderstood. The world will not know what to do with you. People will project their fears onto your clarity, their insecurity onto your confidence, their guilt onto your silence. They will assume you are cold, cruel, or arrogant, because you no longer need their approval, because you speak from a place they have never visited. And it unsettles them. It forces them to confront the question they've been running from. What do I truly believe, and why? Nietzsche's terrifying mind is not one that seeks power over others. It seeks power over itself. It does not impose its will. It lives it. It does not evangelize. It embodies. And this embodiment, this unapologetic alignment with one's deepest truth, is what makes it so formidable. You cannot debate it, because it is not playing your game. You cannot shame it, because it has already walked through its own hell. You cannot recruit it, because it belongs to no cause but its own becoming. In a world desperate to label, control, and categorize everything. A mind that lives beyond good and evil is chaos to the system. But it is sacred chaos, the kind that precedes new creation. Nietzsche did not want you to become immoral. He wanted you to outgrow morality, to become something the old world could not explain, something it had no name for, something it feared, because it could no longer contain. They will not understand you. They will call you distant, unfeeling, dangerous, but they will never be able to look away, because your mind, disciplined, silent, and sovereign, will be a mirror that reflects everything they have denied in themselves. Your presence alone will expose their dependency on approval, their addiction to comfort, their fear of freedom. You will not need to speak much. Your decisions, your calm, your refusal to kneel will say everything. Nietzsche did not offer comfort. He offered a challenge, a brutal, beautiful challenge to rise, to kill the herd inside you, to wield your will like fire, to transmute suffering into wisdom, to build a mind so structured, so intentional that no storm can move it, and to step beyond good and evil into the terrifying realm of self-created meaning. This kind of mind does not seek to control others. It does not strive to be admired. It exists beyond hierarchy, beyond imitation. It is not loud, but it is undeniable. It stands where others collapse. It creates where others conform. It speaks when silence is most powerful, and when it moves, it changes the ground beneath it. The world doesn't fear violence. It fears clarity. It fears a person who cannot be bought, swayed, or broken, a person who has looked into chaos and did not flinch. This is not for everyone, but for those who are ready. Nietzsche left the blueprint. You are not here to belong. You are here to become.